My son gave my $1.5 million ranch to his wife's parents, saying I'd had my turn with it. The silence that followed those words was more deafening than any scream. There I was, standing in the kitchen of my Austin apartment, holding the phone with hands that trembled like leaves in a storm. Today, I'm going to tell you something I never thought I'd tell, and if you, for just a second, feel like this sounds familiar, I just ask that you leave a like and subscribe. It will help me to keep unburdening my soul. My name is Carol Ann Miller. I'm 68 years old, and for 43 years, I built a ranch on the outskirts of Austin, Texas, with my own 2 hands and the sweat of my brow, a ranch that is now worth $1.5 million. 43 years of getting up at 5 in the morning to feed the chickens, tend to the cattle, and plant corn and beans. 43 years with hands cracked by the earth and a heart full of dreams. The ranch was more than just property. It was where my husband Robert and I planted our first pecan tree the day we got married. It was where my 3 children were born. Stephen, the eldest, who now steals my sleep. Patricia, who lives in Seattle and only calls on Christmas. And Michael, who died in a car accident 10 years ago and whose grave I visit every Sunday with flowers from the ranch garden. It was the place where Robert died 5 years ago. In that wooden bed he carved himself, looking out the window at the fields he loved. His last words were, "Take care of our land, Carol Ann. It's the only thing we'll leave the kids that's worth a damn." But apparently, for Stephen and his wife Melissa, Mom had had her turn with her own home. The call came on a Tuesday afternoon while I was slow cooking a brisket for Stephen and Melissa's dinner. They had promised to come visit after 3 weeks of not showing up at the ranch. I had butchered a chicken, bought fresh cornbread from the farmer's market, and cleaned the house until it shone like a mirror. The table was set with the embroidered tablecloth my mother gave me when I married, the heirloom china Robert brought me from a trip for our anniversary, and the crystal glasses I only kept for special occasions. The aroma of the brisket filled the whole house, mixing with the perfume of the gardenias blooming on the patio. "Mom," Stephen said on the phone, with that distant voice he'd adopted since Melissa came into his life 3 years ago. "We're not going to be able to make it today. Melissa isn't feeling well." It was the 5th time in 2 months they had canceled. But this time, there was something different in his tone. Something cold. Something that made my skin crawl. "Is she very sick, honey? Do you need me to come over? Do you want me to bring you the brisket?" "No, Mom. We don't need anything of yours." The sentence hit me like a bucket of ice water. Anything of yours. As if everything I could offer was poison. "Stephen, what's wrong? Did I do something?" There was a long pause. I could hear voices in the background. Melissa's sharp voice saying something I couldn't quite make out. But the tone was one of impatience, of annoyance. "Mom, we need to talk. Melissa's parents are coming from Oklahoma next week. They're going to stay at the ranch." My heart skipped a beat. Melissa's parents, Albert and Rose, were older folks who had lost their house last year to debt. Stephen had told me they were living in a cramped little rental in Tulsa with no dignity. "That's fine, honey. They can stay in the guest room. I'll make space for them." "No, Mom, you don't understand." The silence stretched on for so long I thought the call had dropped. "Stephen, are you there?" "Mom, the ranch isn't yours anymore. I gave it to Melissa's parents. They're going to live there permanently. You've enjoyed it long enough. It's time for others to have a chance." The words came like bullets, one after another, piercing everything I believed was real. Everything I believed was mine. Everything I believed was eternal. "What do you mean it's not mine anymore?" "I signed the papers last week. Melissa's parents need a decent place to live. The ranch is perfect for them. You can stay in your apartment in the city. You're fine there." The apartment. That small, dark place I only went to when I had to run errands in Austin. 2 rooms and a kitchen that looked out onto an inner courtyard where the sun never shone. A place where the air smelled of damp and the neighbors were always yelling. "Stephen, that ranch is mine. It's in my name. Your father and I've already spoken with a lawyer, Mom. As your son and the primary heir, I have the right to make decisions about the family property when I feel it's what's best for everyone." A lie. It was a lie, and he knew it. But in that moment, with my heart shattered and my mind clouded by betrayal, I couldn't think clearly. "Melissa's parents are arriving on Sunday. You need to get your things out before they get there. Stephen, please. Mom, it's decided. Melissa and I thought about it a lot. Her parents have suffered so much. You had your time. Now it's their turn. My time. As if life were a board game where everyone rolls the dice, and when their turn is over, they have to get up and give their seat to someone else. And what am I going to do? Where am I going to live? I already told you. In your apartment. You'll be fine there. Peaceful. Without the worries of the ranch. Worries. The cows I milked every morning were worries. The chickens that gave me fresh eggs were worries. The garden where I grew the reddest tomatoes in the county were worries. Stephen, that land is my life. It was your life, Mom. Not anymore. He hung up. I stood there in the kitchen, holding the dead phone, while the brisket grew cold on the stove and the gardenias on the patio continued to perfume the air of a house that was no longer mine. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat on the ranch's porch, in the rocking chair where Robert used to sit and smoke his pipe after dinner, and I remembered every moment we had lived on that land. The time Stephen took his first steps on the red brick patio. The time Patricia learned to ride the bay mare in the large pasture. The time Michael helped me plant the climbing roses that now covered the entire fence. 43 years. 43 years that Stephen had decided to erase with a single phone call. Sunday arrived like a death sentence. I woke up at 5 in the morning, as I had always done for 43 years. But this time it wasn't to feed my animals, but to say goodbye to them. The chickens ran towards me when they saw me with the feed, not knowing it was the last time their little eyes would see me arrive with my apron stained with dough and my hands full of affection. Betsy, my favorite cow, the one I had raised from a calf, licked my hand when I approached to milk her one last time. Her large, wet eyes looked at me with that blind trust only animals can give. How do you explain to a cow that you won't be there tomorrow? How do you say goodbye to the one who has been your silent companion through so many dawns? I packed my things into 3 cardboard boxes. 43 years of life reduced to 3 boxes that fit in the bed of my old Ford Ranger. The clothes Robert had given me, the photographs of the children when they were small, the family Bible my mother gave me when I married, the good china I only used at Christmas. Everything else stayed. The furniture we had bought penny by penny, the curtains I had sewn by hand, the wardrobe Robert built for our room. At 10 in the morning, I saw Stephen's truck coming up the dirt road. It was followed by a silver SUV I didn't recognize. My heart raced when I saw 4 people get out of the SUV. Albert and Rose, Melissa's parents, and a young couple I later found out were Melissa's brother and his wife with their baby. 6 people. 6 strangers coming to occupy the house that Robert and I built brick by brick. Stephen didn't greet me. He walked directly to the house with the keys in his hand, as if I no longer existed. Melissa's parents looked at me with a mixture of pity and shame, but neither said a word. Albert carried a worn-out brown suitcase. Rose carried a cage with a canary that sang when it saw the ranch's trees. Even the canary had more right to be in my own home than I did. "Mom!" Stephen yelled from the doorway. "Did you get all your stuff out?" All my stuff. As if 43 years of history were a pile of old junk cluttering up a closet. "It's all in the truck," I answered. He didn't ask if I needed help. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't ask anything. He just nodded and motioned for the new occupants to enter. I watched them cross my porch like silent invaders. Albert paused for a moment in the living room and admired the wooden beam ceiling that Robert had put up with his own hands. "What a beautiful house," he murmured to his wife. Beautiful house. My house. The house where I had cried when I lost 3 pregnancies before Stephen was born. The house where I had prayed on my knees when Michael had pneumonia at age 5. The house where I had celebrated every birthday, every Christmas, every Sunday of my adult life. Melissa appeared an hour later, with a smile that seemed to stretch from ear to ear. She was carrying grocery bags and a new coffee maker still in its box. "So glad you're all settled in," she shouted to her parents. "You'll see how comfortable you'll be here. It's so much better than that awful little place you had in Tulsa." She approached me with that fake smile she had perfected over 3 years of marriage to my son. "Mrs. Miller, thank you so much for understanding. I know this can't be easy, but my parents really needed this. You've already lived your life here. Now it's their turn. Already lived your life. As if at 68, you were already dead. As if you no longer had the right to wake up to the crowing of roosters, to water your plants, to feel the earth between your fingers. Besides, Melissa continued, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear, you'll be more comfortable in the city apartment, closer to doctors, to pharmacies. You are getting very lonely out here. This is better for everyone. Better for everyone. The phrase people use when they want to justify the unjustifiable, when they want to make you feel guilty for claiming what is yours. I got into my Ford Ranger without saying goodbye. What was the point? Stephen didn't look at me. He was busy helping Albert unload a new television from the truck. Melissa's brother had already placed a stroller on my porch, and the baby was crawling on the tiles I had mopped that very morning. As I drove down the dirt road, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. I saw Rose hanging clothes on the line Robert had built. I saw Melissa's brother plugging in an electric grill on the patio. I saw Stephen carrying a new rocking chair onto the porch. My rocking chair, the one where Robert sat in the evenings, had been left in a corner, pushed aside like a useless piece of furniture. The drive to Austin had never seemed so long. Every mile I drove was a mile that took me further away from my life. When I got to the apartment, I carried the 3 boxes up the dark stairs and put them in the living room that smelled of damp. From the window, all I could see was the wall of the building across the way and a tiny patch of gray sky between the rooftops. I didn't eat dinner that night. I sat in the only chair I had and tried to imagine what my life would be like here. No animals to care for, no plants to water, no land to work, no purpose. The phone rang at 9 o'clock. It was Patricia, my daughter who lives in Seattle. Mom, Stephen told me about the ranch. Are you okay? Her voice sounded worried but also distant, as if she were talking about a problem that wasn't hers. I'm fine, honey. Mom, you know if it were up to me, things would be different. But I'm so far away, and Stephen has always handled everything down there. Always handled everything. A lie. Stephen had never handled anything. I had managed the ranch for 5 years after Robert died. I had cared for the animals, planted the crops, paid the taxes, fixed the leaky roof. Stephen showed up every couple of months to borrow money or to take free produce to his friends. Have you talked to a lawyer? Patricia asked me. What for? To see what your rights are. That ranch is yours, Mom. Stephen can't just give it away. But I had no strength to fight. I had no money for lawyers. I had no energy for lawsuits that could last for years. At 68, you learn that some battles are won by losing. Let it be, honey. What's the point now? Mom, don't say that. That ranch is worth millions. Millions. As if the value of the ranch was measured in dollars. As if memories had a price. As if the place where I buried the umbilical cords of my 3 children was just a real estate investment. We hung up after she promised she would talk to Stephen. I knew she wouldn't. Patricia had her own life, her own problems. It was easier to pretend that all this was normal, that it was for the best. That first night in the apartment, I couldn't sleep. Every noise startled me. The cars passing on the street, the neighbors arguing next door, the music playing from some distant apartment. At the ranch, the only nightly sounds were the chirping of crickets and the wind in the pecan trees. At 3 in the morning, I got up and searched through my things for our wedding photograph. Robert and I, standing in front of the town church, young and smiling, not knowing that 43 years later, our eldest son would give away everything we had built. What do we do now, Robert? I asked the photograph. What do we do when the children we raised become strangers? But Robert couldn't answer me, and I was completely alone. The days in the apartment dragged by like snails in the sun. I would wake up at 5 in the morning out of habit, but I no longer had chickens to feed, or cows to milk, or plants to water. Just the heavy silence of 4 walls that didn't know my story, and the constant noise of a city that never slept. The first week I tried to keep busy. I cleaned the apartment until it sparkled, though it didn't make much sense since it was already clean. I cooked pinto beans for one person when for 40 years I had cooked for a family. The beans lasted 4 days and went bad because I had no one to give them to. Mrs. Peterson, the neighbor next door, knocked on my door on Thursday morning. She was a thin woman, about my age, with white hair pulled back in a bun, and the tired eyes of someone who has seen too much. "Excuse me, are you the new tenant?" "Yes," I'm Carol. I'm Eleanor Peterson. I live next door. She looked me up and down with curiosity. Are you from out of town? From a ranch, just outside the city. Ah. Her expression changed to a mixture of understanding and pity that I was starting to get to know. Sold it? And moved to the city? I didn't know what to say. How do you explain to a stranger that your own son stripped you of your home? How do you tell her that you no longer own anything? Something like that? I murmured. Mrs. Peterson nodded as if she understood perfectly. Something similar happened to me. My sons convinced me to sell my house in San Antonio to move here. Said I'd be better off, closer to the hospitals. She laughed bitterly. What they didn't tell me is that they were going to keep all the money from the sale for their own expenses. Her words stabbed at me. I wasn't the only one. There were more women like me, more mothers betrayed by the children they had raised with so much love. And what do you do now? I asked her. I get by on my pension. I watch TV. I wait for night to come so I can sleep and not think. She shrugged. What else is there to do at our age? That conversation sank me deeper into despair. Was this my future? To just get by? To wait for death in a room that smelled of damp? Sundays were the worst. For 40 years, Sundays had been sacred at the ranch. Robert and I would go to 8 o'clock mass in town, then come back to make a special meal. Stephen would come with Patricia and Michael when they were little. They would play in the yard while I made brisket or chili. In the afternoons, Robert would sit in his rocking chair, and I would sew or embroider while the children chased butterflies in the garden. Now, Sundays were silent deserts. I went to mass alone at a church where no one knew me, where the priest spoke in a hurry, and people rushed out after the blessing. There was no fellowship, no community, nothing but the fulfilled duty of hearing the word of God among strangers. The third Sunday after my exile, I decided to go to the ranch. Not to reclaim anything, not to make a scene, just to see my plants, to greet my animals, to feel alive for a moment. I drove down the dirt road with my heart pounding. When I arrived, what I saw broke my soul into pieces smaller than the ones I already had. Albert had sold my chickens. The coop was empty, its doors swinging open in the wind. Betsy, my dear cow, was nowhere to be seen. The corral was full of weeds and empty beer bottles. In the yard, where my garden of tomatoes and peppers used to be, there was a new grill and a plastic table with mismatched chairs. The rose bushes I had cared for 20 years were dry, unwatered, their branches broken from neglect. But what hurt the most was seeing my rocking chair, Robert's rocking chair, thrown in a corner of the porch like trash. One of its legs was broken and the seat had a large grease stain. Rose came out of the house when she saw me standing by the fence. She was wearing one of my aprons, the one I had embroidered with red and green flowers. "Oh, Mrs. Miller, so good to see you. How are you?" Her tone was friendly, but there was something forced in her smile, as if my presence made her uncomfortable. "Fine, thank you. I just came to see how the plants were doing." "Oh, well, they're hanging in there. Albert doesn't know much about plants, but we're learning as we go." I looked at the destroyed garden, the dying rose bushes, the abandoned chicken coop. What happened to the chickens? "Oh, well, Albert said they were too much work. He sold them at the market. With that money, we bought the new grill." She pointed to the yard with pride. "We have barbecues on the weekends now. Melissa's kids come over with the grandkids who were now running through my yard, playing where my children had played, enjoying the land that Robert and I had worked with our own hands. And Betsy? The cow? He sold her too. Said one cow wasn't worth the trouble. Besides, none of us know how to milk. 43 years of caring for that bloodline. I had raised Betsy from an orphan calf, feeding her with a bottle in my kitchen. I had watched her grow, give birth to 5 calves, and give me fresh milk every morning. And now she was just money in a stranger's pocket. "Your rocking chair is over there," I told her, pointing to the corner. "Oh yes. Albert says it's too old, that he's going to burn it with some other things that are no longer useful. Burn Robert's rocking chair. Burn the place where he sat every afternoon to smoke his pipe and tell me his plans for the next harvest. Burn the last physical piece of my husband that remained in that house. Can I take it?" Rose looked uncomfortable. "Well, I'd have to ask Albert. But it's broken. What do you want it for?" What did I want it for? How do you explain to someone that a broken piece of furniture is worth more than all the new furniture in the world because the love of your life sat in it for 20 years? Just for memories. Oh, Mrs. Miller, you should look forward, not back. You have your nice apartment in the city now. There's nothing for you here anymore. Nothing for me. In the place where my children were born, where I had buried 3 beloved dogs, where I had planted every tree, where I had lived every happy day of my adult life, Albert appeared just then, sweaty, carrying a case of beer. Mrs. Miller, how are you? Everything all right? She wanted to take her rocking chair, Rose told him. Albert looked towards the corner and then at me. Ah, that old thing. It's all broken, ma'am. It's no good to you. It doesn't matter. I just want to take it. Well, all right. But you carry it, you hear? My back is bad. Rose and I carried the rocking chair to my truck. One of the legs wobbled and the seat creaked with every movement, but it was the last thing I had of Robert, the last thing I had of my real life. As I drove back to Austin with the broken rocking chair in the passenger seat, I cried like I hadn't cried since the day my husband died. I cried for the sold chickens, for the missing Betsy, for the dry rose bushes, for the tomatoes that would never grow in my garden again. But most of all, I cried because I realized that Stephen hadn't just taken my house. He had taken my identity. I was no longer the woman who cared for animals, who planted crops, who fed entire families with the food from her land. Now I was just a lonely old woman in an apartment, waiting for death with a broken rocking chair as my only companion. That night, sitting in the wobbly chair in my small living room, I wondered if Robert would forgive me for letting our son destroy everything we had built together. I wondered if he would have fought harder, if he would have known how to defend our land. But Robert was gone, and I was completely alone with my pain and my broken rocking chair. The nights became my worst enemy. During the day, I could pretend I was fine, that this new life made sense, that everything would get better. But when darkness fell and I sat in Robert's broken rocking chair, reality crushed me like a giant stone on my chest. A week after my visit to the ranch, Stephen showed up at my door. He hadn't called, hadn't given any warning. He just rang the bell at 8 o'clock at night as if it were any normal visit. When I opened the door, I saw him standing there with a grocery bag in one hand and that fake smile he had perfected since marrying Melissa. "Hi, Mom. How are you?" As if nothing had happened. As if he hadn't dispossessed me of my home a week before. As if we were a mother and son having dinner together any Tuesday night. "What are you doing here, Stephen?" "I came to visit you, to see how you're settling in." He held up the bag. "I brought you some things from the store." He walked in without an invitation, as if he had the right to be everywhere. He put the bag on the kitchen table and started taking things out. A can of beans, a package of tortillas, a bottle of oil, powdered milk. Cheap food. The kind of food they give to the poor in nursing homes. "What's this for?" "So, you have something to eat, Mom." It occurred to me that maybe you haven't had time to go to the supermarket. He sat in the only chair I had as if he owned the place. His gaze swept over the small apartment, the broken rocking chair in the corner, the 3 boxes I still hadn't fully unpacked. "You look good here. More peaceful. More peaceful." As if being destroyed inside was peace. "Stephen, I need to ask you something." "Of course, Mom. Anything. How could you give away my house? How could you take away everything your father and I built?" His smile vanished for a second, but he quickly recovered it. "Mom, we've already talked about this. I didn't take anything from you. I just made a smart decision for the whole family." "Smart for who?" "For everyone. Melissa's parents needed a decent place to live. You're better off here, without the worries of the ranch. You don't have to get up early anymore. You don't have to take care of animals. You can rest." "Rest." The word they use to say you're no longer useful. That ranch was mine, Stephen. Your father and I bought it. We built it. We paid for it penny by penny. It belonged to both of you, Mom. And when Dad died, I was left as the man of the family. It was my responsibility to make the best decisions. The man of the family. As if being a woman had made me incapable of managing my own life after 40 years of doing just that. "And did you consult me? Did you ask me what I wanted to do with my house?" "Mom, you don't understand these things. The legal paperwork, the deeds, the taxes. I studied business administration. I know what's best. What's best for whom, Stephen? He got up from the chair and began to pace the living room like a caged lion. Mom, why do you always have to complicate things? Why can't you just be grateful that I'm looking out for you? Grateful? I had to be grateful that my son had stolen my home. You're looking out for me? Really? Of course I am. Do you think this decision was easy for me? Do you think it didn't hurt me? He sat on the edge of the broken rocking chair, which creaked under his weight. For a moment, he looked genuinely sad. Mom, Melissa and I thought about it a lot. Her parents have suffered so much. They lost their house. They're living in terrible conditions. We have the opportunity to help them. With my house? With our house. The family's house. Stephen, that house was not yours to give away. Mom, I'm your eldest son. When you're gone, it's all going to be mine anyway. I'm just speeding things up a bit. When you're gone. As if I were already dead. As if what I wanted or felt no longer mattered. And what if I want to keep living there until I die? Mom, be realistic. What are you going to do alone in such a big ranch? What if you get sick? What if you have an accident? Here in the city, you're safer. Safer. Alone in an apartment where no one knows me. Where no one will find me if I fall and can't get up. At the ranch, I had neighbors. I had Mr. and Mrs. Connolly next door. I had Dr. Hernandez in town. Mom, the Connollys are very old. What help are they going to be? Dr. Hernandez must be 100 years old. I had my life, Stephen. I had my plants, my animals, my routine. You had obligations you could no longer meet. Mom, let's be honest. The ranch was falling apart. You couldn't maintain it like before. Like before. Like when Robert was alive. Like when I was younger. Like when I was still worth something. You could have helped me instead of taking it from me. Help you how? By giving you money every month to spend on a chicken coop? By paying for farmhands to maintain something that no longer makes sense? No longer makes sense. My life no longer made sense to my own son. Stephen, do you know what that place means to me? I know it means a lot, Mom, but sometimes we have to let go of things from the past to move toward the future. What future? Locked up in here waiting to die? Mom, don't be so dramatic. You can do lots of things. You can take up crafts. You can make friends at church. You can watch TV. Crafts. As if I were a 5-year-old child who needs to be entertained. And what if I don't want to do crafts? What if I want to keep planting my corn and taking care of my cows? Mom, that's over. You're not a rancher anymore. Now you're a retired lady living comfortably in the city. A retired lady. As if I had worked in an office for 30 years and now received a government pension. Stephen, I never retired from being who I am. But you have to adapt to your new reality. My new reality. The reality he had decided for me without asking. He stayed for another 20 minutes, talking about unimportant things. About how Melissa was decorating the ranch house. About how her parents were happy. About how good he felt knowing he had helped a family in need. Helped with what was mine. Generous with what wasn't his. When he left, I sat at the kitchen table looking at the bag of cheap food he had brought me. Canned beans when I had cooked pinto beans from scratch for 40 years. Packaged tortillas when I had made tortillas by hand since I learned to walk. Powdered milk when Betsy had given me fresh milk every morning for 8 years. All fake. All processed. All soulless. Like my new life. That night, I dreamed of Robert. We were at the ranch, but not as I had seen it last week, but as it was before, when it was alive. The roses were blooming. The chickens were running in the yard. Betsy was mooing for her morning feed. Why did you let him, Carol Ann? Robert asked me in the dream. Why did you let them take our life away? I didn't know how to fight, I answered, crying. I didn't know how to defend myself. You still can, he said. There's still time. I woke up at 5 in the morning with wet cheeks and a strange feeling in my chest. It wasn't sadness or despair. It was something I hadn't felt in weeks. It was courage. For the first time since Stephen had thrown me out of my house, I felt that maybe not all was lost. Maybe I could still do something. Maybe I still had the strength to fight. I got up, showered, put on my nicest dress, and went out. I had an appointment with a lawyer. Mr. Davis's office was in downtown Austin. in an old building that smelled of yellowed paper and cold coffee. I had found his number in the yellow pages that Mrs. Peterson had kept for 10 years. "He's the only lawyer I know," she had told me. "He helped my cousin when her son tried to take her house." I climbed 3 flights of stairs that creaked with every step. My heart was beating so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. Not from the physical exertion, but from the hope I had been carrying since I woke up with Robert's words echoing in my ears. The secretary was a young woman chewing gum while typing on an old computer. She looked me up and down when I told her I wanted to speak with the lawyer. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, but it's urgent." "Everyone says it's urgent. Mr. Davis is busy." I stood there for 20 minutes, waiting, watching the secretary answer the phone and pretend I didn't exist. Just as I was about to leave, a man of about 50 came out, short, with a mustache and a belly, carrying a worn briefcase. "Are you the lady looking for Mr. Davis?" "Yes, sir." "That's me. Come into my office." His office was small and filled with dusty books and files stacked to the ceiling. He sat behind an old wooden desk and offered me a chair that had seen better days. "Tell me, how can I help you?" I told him the whole story, from the beginning. How Robert and I bought the ranch when we were young, how we paid it off over 20 years, how we raised our children there, how I worked the land for 5 years after my husband died, how Stephen showed up one day and told me he had given my house away. Mr. Davis took notes in a yellow legal pad, occasionally asking questions, but mostly listening attentively. When I finished speaking, he was silent for several minutes, reviewing his notes. "Mrs. Miller, do you have the deed to the ranch?" "Yes, I have it in my apartment." "Is it in your name and your husband's name?" "Yes, both." "Did your husband leave a will?" "Yes." "In the will, does he name you as the sole heir?" "Yes." "Then, ma'am, your son had no legal right to give away that property. The ranch is yours, completely yours." The words fell on me like rain on dry earth. Completely mine. After weeks of feeling like a thief in my own life, someone confirmed that I was right. "But the lawyer Stephen hired?" "Any lawyer who participated in that transaction committed fraud. Your son cannot dispose of a property that is not his. What can I do? We can sue for dispossession, fraud, and emotional distress. We can get your ranch back and also demand compensation for the damages they have caused you." For the first time in weeks, I felt I could breathe fully. "How long does that take?" "It depends. With the evidence you have, we could get a temporary eviction order within a month. The full trial could take between 6 months and a year. How much does it cost?" Mr. Davis settled into his chair and looked at me kindly. "Ma'am, I'm going to be honest with you. A lawsuit like this can cost between $20,000 and $40,000. But there's another option." "What's that?" "We can work on a contingency basis. If we win, you pay me 20% of the value of the ranch. If we lose, you pay me nothing." 20% of $1.5 million was $300,000. A fortune. But if I did nothing, I would lose the entire $1.5 million. Do you think we can win? "Ma'am, with the evidence you have, this case is a slam dunk. Your son committed a crime. What he did is punishable by law." I signed the papers that same afternoon. For the first time in weeks, I walked out onto the street feeling I still had some control over my life. But Stephen wasn't going to stand idly by. 3 days after my visit to the lawyer, I received a call that chilled my blood. "Mom, what did you do?" It was Stephen, but his voice sounded different. It was no longer the condescending tone he had used the week before. Now he sounded furious. "What are you talking about? You know perfectly well what I'm talking about. How could you sue me? How could you do this to your own son? Stephen, I just want my house back." "Your house! Always the same thing. Don't you understand it's not your house anymore? Don't you understand I've already made a decision? A decision you had no right to make. I have every right. I'm your eldest son. That doesn't give you the right to steal from me. I didn't steal anything from you. I'm taking care of you. I'm protecting you from yourself." Protecting me from what? From your stubbornness. From your inability to accept that you're old. From your refusal to live in reality. Old. Incapable. Unrealistic. Every word was a slap. "Stephen, I'm going to get my ranch back." "No, Mom, you're not. Because I'm going to fight this to the end." "With what money?" As far as I know, you don't have money for lawyers. There was a long silence. Too long. Mom, if you continue with this nonsense, you're going to destroy this family. What family, Stephen? The family that threw me out of my own house? The family that is taking care of you? The family that worries about you? You didn't take care of me when you left me homeless. You didn't worry about me when you sent me to live in a damp room. That apartment is perfectly fine. For you. Not for me. Mom, I'm going to make you an offer. Drop the lawsuit and I'll help you pay for a nice retirement home, where you'll have friends, where they'll take good care of you, where you won't have to worry about anything. A nursing home. He wanted to put me in a nursing home so I wouldn't be his problem anymore. No, Stephen. Think about it, Mom. Because if you don't drop that lawsuit, things are going to get very ugly. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. Melissa knows very good lawyers. Lawyers who know how to prove that an elderly person can no longer make decisions for themselves. My blood ran cold. He wanted to declare me mentally incompetent. Stephen, my faculties are perfectly fine. Oh, really? A person who is fine sues her own son for helping some poor old folks? A person who is fine defends what is hers. Mom, drop the lawsuit. It's your last chance for this to end well. No. Fine. You asked for it. He hung up. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in Robert's broken rocking chair, thinking about Stephen's words. Could he really have me declared incompetent? Did he have any legal power to do that? At 3 a.m, the phone rang. It was Patricia, my daughter from Seattle. Mom, Stephen told me about the lawsuit. Are you crazy? Patricia, it's my ranch. Mom, it's a house. Just a house. Is it worth destroying the family over a house? The same thing again. Just a house. As if the 40 years I lived there meant nothing. Patricia, did you know what Stephen was planning? I knew he was worried about you. I knew he wanted to help Melissa's in-laws. And it didn't seem strange to you that he kicked me out of my house to move in strangers? Mom, Melissa's parents aren't strangers. They're family. They're Melissa's family, not mine. Mom, listen to me carefully. If you go on with this lawsuit, I'm not going to support you. I can't go against my brother over a whim of yours. A whim. Defending my heritage was a whim. And if it were your house, Patricia, if someone took it from you without asking, I wouldn't cling to material things like you do. It's not material things. It's my life. It was your life, Mom. Not anymore. Patricia also hung up. I was left alone in the darkness, understanding that the battle I was about to fight wasn't just against Stephen. It was against my entire family. It was against the idea that older women have no right to decide about their own lives. But for the first time in months, instead of feeling defeated, I felt determined. If they wanted a war, they were going to get one. The war began a week later with a summons that arrived at my door. The official paper had the seal of the family court and the words Stephen had threatened to use. Petition for declaration of incompetence due to senile mental deterioration. My hands trembled as I read. Stephen, along with Melissa, was requesting that a judge declare me mentally unfit to manage my assets and appoint Stephen as my legal guardian. The document was full of technical terms I didn't fully understand, but the message was clear. They wanted to take away my right to own my own life. I ran to the phone and called Mr. Davis. Mrs. Miller, this was to be expected. It's a desperate tactic, but a common one when someone feels cornered. Can they do it? Can they declare me crazy? Ma'am, you are not crazy. You will have to undergo a psychological evaluation, but don't worry. A person who can narrate the facts with the clarity you showed in my office has no mental problems. What if they lie? What if they make things up? They will try, but the truth always comes to light. 3 days later, the second summons arrived. This time it was for Patricia. Stephen had convinced her to come from Seattle to testify against me. My own daughter, who had grown up on that ranch, who had learned to walk in those yards, who had been happy among those trees, was coming to help take it away from me. The appointment with the psychologist was in a cold office that smelled of disinfectant. Dr. Evans was a young man, about 30, with glasses and a neatly trimmed beard. He asked me questions for 2 hours. What is your full name? Carol Ann Miller. What day is it today? Thursday, March 15th, 2024. Who is the President of the United States? Joe Biden. Can you tell me what happened last year? I told him everything. Robert's death 5 years ago. How I had managed the ranch alone since then. How Stephen had shown up with the news that he had given my house away. Every date, every detail, every emotion. The doctor took notes nonstop. Occasionally, he asked me to repeat something or to clarify a date. Mrs. Miller, why do you think your son did this? Because Melissa convinced him. Because he wanted to look good for her parents. Because he thinks old women have no right to decide about our own lives. Do you feel capable of managing your finances? I managed the finances of the ranch for 5 years after my husband died. I paid taxes, bought seeds, sold harvests, cared for animals. If I could handle all that, I can handle my own life. At the end of the evaluation, the doctor looked thoughtful. Mrs. Miller, I'm going to be honest with you. I find no evidence of mental deterioration. Your answers are coherent, your memory is intact, and your judgment seems appropriate for the situation you are living through. For the first time in weeks, I breathed easily. What does that mean? It means I will recommend to the judge that you are fully capable of making your own decisions. But Stephen wasn't going to give up so easily. On the day of the hearing, I arrived at the courthouse in my most elegant black dress, the one I had worn to Robert's funeral. Mr. Davis was waiting for me at the door with a reassuring smile. Are you ready, Mrs. Miller? I'm ready. The courtroom was small and cold. The judge, an older man with a white mustache, looked tired. Stephen was sitting on the other side with Melissa and a lawyer I didn't know. A tall, elegant man who looked very expensive. Patricia was there too. My daughter, who had come all the way from Seattle to testify that her mother was crazy. When our eyes met, she turned her face away. Stephen's lawyer stood up first. He was a snake in a suit. Your Honor, we are here because Mrs. Carol Miller is suffering from a mental decline that makes her incapable of making rational decisions. She has sued her own son for helping a family in need. She shows signs of paranoia, extreme stubbornness, and a disconnection from reality. Every word was a dagger. Paranoia for defending what was mine. Stubbornness for not letting myself be robbed. Disconnection for wanting to live in my own home. As evidence, we present the testimony of her son, Stephen Miller, and her daughter, Patricia Miller, who have observed these changes in their mother's behavior. Stephen approached the stand. My son, the boy I had raised, the man I had educated with values of honesty and respect, stood before the judge to lie about me. Your Honor, my mother has changed a lot since my dad died. She's become obsessive about the ranch. She refuses to accept help. She lives in dangerous conditions. Last year, she fell and hurt herself, but wouldn't go to the doctor. She doesn't eat well. She doesn't take care of herself. Lies. All lies mixed with half-truths that sounded convincing. When we offered to help her live more comfortably in the city, she became aggressive. When we tried to help my wife's parents by giving them a decent place to live, she reacted with emotional violence. Emotional violence. For crying when they stole my house. Your Honor, my mother needs help. She needs someone to make decisions for her because she can no longer do so rationally. Next, it was Patricia's turn. My daughter approached the stand without looking at me. Her voice trembled as she began to speak. Your Honor, I live in Seattle, but I've noticed changes in my mother when I talk to her on the phone. She complains constantly. She says things that don't make sense. She's obsessed with the past. Can you give specific examples? She says my brother stole her house when he's actually just trying to help her. She says she's alone when she has family who cares about her. She says she can't live without the ranch, as if a place were more important than her own family. As if a place were more important than family. The family that had thrown me out of that place. Your Honor, I believe my mother needs professional help. She needs someone else to make the important decisions to protect her from herself. When Patricia finished, she sat down without looking at me once. It was as if I were already dead to her. Then it was my turn. Mr. Davis helped me approach the stand. My legs were shaking, but my voice came out clear and strong. Your Honor, my name is Carol Ann Miller. I am 68 years old, and I have worked my whole life. I bought that ranch with my husband 40 years ago. We paid for it with our labor. We built it with our hands. We raised our children there. I looked directly at the judge. When my husband died 5 years ago, I continued to manage the ranch alone. I paid taxes, sold harvests, cared for animals. I never had mental problems. I never had trouble with the authorities. I never needed help managing my affairs. Why do you believe your family is requesting this declaration of incompetence? Because they want to keep my property without facing the legal consequences of having stolen it from me. Because it's easier to declare me crazy than to admit they committed fraud. Do you feel you are capable of managing your own affairs? Your Honor, if I weren't capable, how would I have been able to hire a lawyer? How would I have been able to file a coherent lawsuit? How would I have been able to be here today defending myself with clarity? The judge looked at me for a long moment. What is it that you want, Mrs. Miller? I want my house back. I want to live on the land I worked for 40 years. I want to die in the place where I was happy with my husband. I don't want much. I just want what is mine. My voice broke at the end, but I kept talking. Your Honor, I am not crazy. I am just an older woman fighting to keep the only thing she has left of her life. If that's craziness, then all the mothers in America are crazy. The silence in the room was complete. Even Stephen had stopped moving. Your Honor, I continued, my children believe that because I am old, I no longer have the right to decide about my life, but age has not taken away my reason. It has only given me more experience to know when I'm being lied to. The judge reviewed the papers for several minutes. Then he looked up. Based on the psychological evaluation and the testimony I have heard today, I find insufficient evidence to declare Mrs. Carol Miller incompetent. The petition is denied. Stephen stood up furiously. Your Honor, this is a mistake. My mother needs help. Mr. Miller, your mother has just demonstrated that she can defend herself perfectly well. This hearing is concluded. I walked out of the courthouse feeling victorious for the first time in months. I had won the first battle, but the war was far from over. The victory in court lasted exactly 3 days. On Thursday morning, while I was having coffee and toast at my small table, the phone rang with a force that startled me. Mrs. Miller, this is Mr. Davis. I need to see you urgently. His voice sounded tense, worried. It was not the same confident tone he had used after winning the hearing. What happened, Mr. Davis? It's better if we talk in person. Can you come to my office this afternoon? The drive downtown felt like an eternity. The Austin traffic seemed heavier than ever. Every red light an eternity. Every horn a scream of desperation that added to my own anguish. When I arrived at the office, Mr. Davis was waiting for me with a pile of documents on his desk and an expression I didn't like at all. Mrs. Miller, I have news, good and bad. Tell me the bad news first. Your son and daughter-in-law have hired one of the most expensive law firms in Austin, Flores, Mendoza, and Associates. They specialize in complex cases and have a lot of resources. My stomach clenched. I knew Stephen didn't have money for expensive lawyers. With what money? That's precisely the good news. We've discovered that they financed the payment for these lawyers by selling part of the ranch land. My world collapsed. Not only had they stolen my house, but now they were selling off pieces of my land to pay lawyers to fight against me. How is that possible? How can they sell something that isn't theirs? They forged your signature on several documents. They submitted papers where you supposedly grant them power of attorney to sell. This is aggravated fraud, Mrs. Miller. Now we have hard evidence that they committed serious crimes. What did they sell? The lawyer consulted his papers. 5 acres from the back part of the ranch. They sold it to a construction company for $800,000. $800,000. Part of my land. Sold to pay lawyers who were going to keep stealing from me. It was like they were killing me with my own blood. So, what do we do now? Now we sue them for aggravated fraud, forgery, and criminal conspiracy. This is no longer just a civil dispute, Mrs. Miller. It's a criminal case. Your son and your daughter-in-law could go to prison. Prison. The word prison hit me like a lightning bolt. Stephen in prison. My eldest son. The boy I had raised. The man I had brought up to be honest and hardworking. Locked up like a common criminal. Mr. Davis, I don't want Stephen to go to prison. I just want my house back. Ma'am, I understand your feelings. But they've turned this into something much more serious. This isn't just about the house anymore. These are crimes that affect all of society. I couldn't sleep that night. I sat in Robert's broken rocking chair, thinking about Stephen when he was a boy. I remembered him at 5 years old, helping me feed the chickens, his small hands filling the containers with corn. I remembered him at 12, learning to milk Betsy, proud when he finally managed to fill the bucket without the cow moving. I remembered him at 18, the day he left for college, promising he would come back to the ranch to help Robert and me. At what point had that good boy turned into a man capable of stealing from his own mother? 2 days later, I received a visit I wasn't expecting. Someone knocked on my door at 8 o'clock at night. When I opened it, I found a woman I didn't recognize at first. Mrs. Miller? She was young, about 25, thin, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and eyes red as if she had been crying. I'm Lucy Hernandez. I used to work at the ranch. Lucy, the young woman Stephen had hired last year to help with cleaning and caring for the animals when I couldn't do it all myself anymore. Lucy, what are you doing here? How did you find me? Your son gave me your address when he fired me. Mrs. Miller, I need to talk to you. I invited her in. She sat on the edge of the chair like a frightened bird, wringing her hands in her lap. Ma'am, I came because I can't stay quiet about what's happening. What's wrong, honey? Your son and Mrs. Melissa, they asked me to lie. My blood ran cold. Lie about what? They asked me to go to court and say you were losing your mind, that I had seen you talking to yourself, that you were forgetting things, that you couldn't take care of the animals. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. But Mrs. Miller, you were never unwell. You always knew everything that was going on at the ranch. You taught me how to care for the chickens. You explained how to plant the corn. You helped me when my mother got sick. And what did you tell them? I told them I wasn't going to lie, that you were always good to me and I wasn't going to betray you. And so they fired you? Yes. Mrs. Melissa yelled at me, said I was ungrateful, that after everything they had done for me, I wouldn't help them. Mr. Stephen told me that if I didn't testify for them, he would sue me for theft. Theft of what? Of nothing, ma'am. I never stole anything. But he said he would make up that I had taken things from the ranch. Lucy pulled a crumpled envelope from her bag. Mrs. Miller, I recorded a conversation. What conversation? When Mr. Stephen and Mrs. Melissa were planning all of this. I was cleaning the kitchen and they didn't know I was there. I recorded everything with my phone. She handed me the envelope. Inside was an old cell phone. What does the recording say? It's better if you listen for yourself. I put the phone on the table and pressed play. Stephen's voice filled my small living room, as clear as if he were right there. Melissa, we have to get her declared incompetent. It's the only way this works. But Stephen, what if it doesn't work? What if the psychologist says she's fine? That's why we need witnesses. Lucy can say she's seen her acting strangely. Patricia has already agreed to come down from Seattle. And what if Lucy doesn't want to? We'll force her. If she doesn't cooperate, we'll accuse her of theft. That'll shut her up. Stephen, don't you feel bad about what we're doing to your mom? There was a long pause. Very long. Melissa, my mom has already lived her life. Now it's our turn. My parents aren't going to leave us anything but the ranch. If we don't take advantage of it now, we'll be left with nothing. And your mom? My mom will be fine in a nursing home. She'll have medical care. She'll have company. It'll be better for her. Don't you think she'll realize what we did? Realize what? Officially, we're helping my in-laws because they're family. Officially, we're taking care of an old woman who can't live alone anymore. The recording continued, but I couldn't listen anymore. I turned off the phone with trembling hands. Lucy, when did you record this? 2 months ago, ma'am. Before they moved you out of the ranch. 2 months. Stephen had been planning to rob me for 2 months. It hadn't been an impulsive decision. It hadn't been just to help Melissa's parents. It had been a calculated plan to take my inheritance. Mrs. Miller, there's more. More what? I saw when Mr. Stephen forged your signature to sell the land. I saw him practicing in a notebook, copying your handwriting over and over again. Do you have proof of that? I have the notebook. I took it out of the trash after they threw it away. Lucy pulled another object from her bag. It was a school composition book, the kind elementary school kids use. On the pages were dozens of practiced signatures. Carol Ann Miller, written again and again with different pens, until the handwriting looked exactly like mine. Lucy, why did you keep all this? Because you were always good to me, Mrs. Miller. Because when my mom got sick, you loaned me money for the medicine. Because when I didn't have money for rent, You gave me extra work so I could pay it." The girl began to cry again. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry about what they're doing to you. You don't deserve this. You're a good person." For the first time in months, someone recognized me as a good person. Someone realized this was wrong. "Lucy, would you be willing to testify? To tell all of this to a judge?" "Yes, ma'am. That's why I came. To help you get your home back." I hugged her as if she were my own daughter. This 25-year-old girl had more loyalty and courage than my own children. "Thank you, honey. Thank you for being honest when no one else was." The next day, I went to Mr. Davis's office with Lucy and all the evidence. When the lawyer heard the recording and saw the notebook with the practiced signatures, his face lit up as if he'd hit the jackpot. "Mrs. Miller, with this, we're not just going to get your ranch back. With this, Stephen and Melissa are going to prison. No doubt about it. But I still wasn't sure I wanted my son to go to prison. I still held out hope that this could all be resolved without completely destroying my family. I didn't know that Stephen had already made the decision to destroy it for me. The call came at 6 in the morning on Tuesday. The phone rang with an insistence that only bad news brings, waking me from a dream where Robert and I were at the ranch again, young, planting the first pecan tree. "Mrs. Miller?" It was a voice I didn't recognize. Formal. Official. "Yes, this is she. This is Deputy Clark from the Travis County Sheriff's Office. We need you to come down to the station immediately." My heart raced so fast I thought I was going to have a heart attack right there. "What happened? Is something wrong with my son?" "Ma'am, it's better if we speak in person. Can you come now?" "Yes, I'm on my way." I got dressed with trembling hands, thinking of the 1,000 tragedies that could have happened. An accident, a fight, revenge for the lawsuit. Stephen hurt in the hospital, or worse, Stephen dead because of me. The sheriff's station smelled of stale coffee and cigarettes. Deputy Clark was a young man, about 30, with the tired face of someone who had worked all night. "Mrs. Miller, please have a seat. Tell me what happened to my son." "Your son is fine, ma'am. Physically, he's fine." I breathed a sigh of relief for a second, until I processed the word physically. "Then what happened?" "Ma'am, last night your son and daughter-in-law were arrested for arson." The words fell on me like stones. Arson. Stephen. Arrested. Arson of what? "Of your ranch, ma'am. They burned down the main house and part of the stables." My world came crashing down. My house. My home. The rooms where my children were born. The kitchen where I had cooked for 40 years. The room where Robert had died. All burned. How do you know it was them?" "The neighbors saw them. Mr. Connolly recognized them perfectly. Besides, we found gas cans in their truck." Mr. Connolly. My neighbor for my entire life. The only one who had dared to tell the truth. Why would they do something like that? Deputy Clark consulted his papers. "According to the statements, it seems they knew you were going to win the lawsuit to get the property back. By burning the house, they destroyed what you wanted to recover." Stephen's perverse logic left me speechless. If he couldn't have my house, he would destroy it so I couldn't have it either. He was like a child breaking a toy rather than letting his sibling play with it. "Is everything burned?" "The main house is completely destroyed. The stables have partial damage. The fruit trees didn't burn because the wind changed direction. The pecan trees that Robert and I had planted were saved. It was the only thing left of our life together. Can I go see it?" "Ma'am, right now it's a crime scene. Maybe tomorrow, after the investigators are finished." "And Stephen? Can I see him?" "He's in custody along with his wife. They'll be arraigned before a judge this afternoon. Arson is a serious felony, ma'am. They could be in prison for many years." I left the station feeling like I was walking through a nightmare. Stephen had burned my house. My own son had destroyed the home where he grew up, where he learned to walk, where he celebrated every birthday of his childhood. I called Mr. Davis from a payphone. "Mr. Davis, Stephen burned down the ranch." "I just heard, Mrs. Miller. It's terrible, but it's also confirmation that your son is completely desperate. Only someone who knows they're about to lose everything is capable of such destruction. And what happens with the case now? Now we have a major felony. Arson, destruction of property, property damage. Stephen is not getting out of this one, Mrs. Miller." That afternoon, I went to the courthouse. I wanted to see Stephen when he was brought before the judge. I needed to understand how my son had come to this. The room was full of reporters. Apparently, the story of a son who stole his mother's house and then burned it down had captured the media's attention. When Stephen entered in handcuffs, flanked by 2 deputies, the cameras went wild. He looked terrible, gaunt, with dirty clothes, a scraggly beard, and bloodshot eyes. Melissa followed behind, also in handcuffs, crying nonstop. The judge read the charges in a monotone voice: arson, destruction of property, aggravated fraud, forgery. The list seemed endless. Each crime was another stab in my mother's heart. When the judge asked if they had anything to say before setting bail, Stephen asked to speak. "Your Honor, I didn't want things to go this far." His voice sounded broken, defeated. But my mother was destroying us. She was going to leave us with nothing. My wife's parents were going to be back on the street. He was still blaming me. Even there, in handcuffs and accused of multiple felonies, he still thought I was the bad guy. "Your Honor, if my mother had just been reasonable, none of this would have happened." The judge looked at him with a stern expression. "Mr. Miller, you are accused of burning down a house. Do you consider that a reasonable response to a family conflict?" Stephen hung his head. "No, Your Honor." "Do you have any explanation for your behavior?" Stephen looked up and for the first time looked directly at me. "Your Honor, my mother has always been very stubborn. Ever since we were kids, when she got something in her head, no one could change her mind." Stubborn. That was his explanation for burning down my house. That I was stubborn. "Your Honor, we tried to make her understand nicely that it was time to leave the ranch, that she was too old to live alone in the country, but she wouldn't listen. And so you decided to burn the property?" "Your Honor, when we saw she was going to win the lawsuit, we got desperate. My wife's parents had nowhere to go. We had spent all our savings on lawyers." "Spent your savings? Or illegally sold part of the land?" Stephen fell silent. "Mr. Miller, did you burn the house so that your mother couldn't get it back?" Another long pause. "Yes, Your Honor." The confession echoed in the courtroom like a gunshot. Reporters wrote furiously. Cameras recorded every second. The judge set bail at $500,000 for each of them. Since it was obvious they didn't have the money, Stephen and Melissa were remanded to custody. As I was leaving the courthouse, a reporter intercepted me. "Mrs. Miller, how do you feel knowing your son is going to prison?" "I feel very sad," I answered honestly. "He's my son. I love him even though he's done terrible things." "Do you forgive him?" The question caught me off guard. Did I forgive him? How do you forgive someone who stole your home and then burned it down so you couldn't get it back? "Forgiveness is something that takes time," I said finally. "First, I need to process everything that has happened." That night, Patricia called me from Seattle. She was hysterical. "Mom, Stephen's in jail. It's all over the news. My friends are asking me what's going on." "I know, honey." "You have to drop the charges. You have to help him." "Patricia, Stephen burned down my house. Because of you. This is all your fault. If you hadn't been so stubborn, none of this would have happened." Stubborn again. The magic word that justified everything. "Patricia, I just wanted to live in my own home." "Mom, it was just a house. Stephen is your son. Family is more important than property." "Then why didn't he think of that before he robbed me?" "Because you wouldn't be reasonable." Patricia hung up on me too. Now I had lost both my children. One was in jail, and the other blamed me for everything. The next day, I went to see the remains of the ranch. Mr. Davis came with me. The scene was devastating. The main house was just blackened rubble. The limestone walls that Robert had built block by block had crumbled. The red tin roof we had installed with such pride was now a twisted heap of metal. The kitchen where I had prepared thousands of meals was a black hole. The room where my children were born no longer existed. The place where Robert had died was ash, but the pecan trees were still there, green, strong, full of life, as if they were silent guardians of all that had been destroyed. "Mrs. Miller," Mr. Davis said, "we can sue the insurance company to rebuild. Will the insurance pay? Arson is covered, especially when the culprits have been arrested." I walked through the rubble, stepping on the remains of my life. I found pieces of the heirloom china, completely black. Shards of the mirror where I had combed my hair for 40 years. Twisted pieces of metal that had been the stove where I cooked. But I also found something that surprised me. In a corner of what had been my bedroom, protected by a fallen beam, was my wedding photograph, charred at the edges, but recognizable. Robert and I, young and smiling, on the day we started our life together. I took it in my trembling hands. It was like a message, as if Robert were telling me that not all was lost. For the first time since this nightmare began, I smiled. My wedding photograph became my talisman during the months that followed. I carried it in my purse everywhere, touching it when I felt the world was crashing down on me. It was proof that happiness had existed in my life, that I had built something beautiful with Robert, something that neither Stephen nor the flames had been able to completely destroy. The legal process moved slowly, as it often does. Stephen and Melissa remained in jail, unable to make bail. Melissa's parents had disappeared from the ranch the night of the fire, taking whatever they could carry in their old SUV. Nobody knew where they were. But things started to change when the story hit the national news. Son burns down mother's house after stealing it became a headline in newspapers and on television shows. Reporters started coming to my apartment, wanting to know more details of what they began calling the case of the dispossessed grandmother. At first, I didn't want to talk to them. I was ashamed that the whole country knew my own son had betrayed me. But Mrs. Peterson, my neighbor, convinced me. Carol, you have to tell your story. There are so many women like you, so many mothers suffering the same thing. If you speak up, maybe they'll find the strength to defend themselves. The first television program was terrifying. The host was an elegant woman, about 40, who treated me with great kindness but asked very direct questions. Mrs. Miller, did you ever imagine your son would be capable of this? Never. Stephen was always a good boy. When he was little, he helped me with everything. He'd bring me wildflowers from the field, tell me that when he grew up, he'd buy me a prettier house. What do you think changed? Melissa. Ever since he married her, Stephen started seeing everything differently, as if our simple life wasn't enough, as if having land and animals was something to be ashamed of. Do you blame your daughter-in-law? The question made me think. Did I blame Melissa? Or was it just easier to blame her than to accept that Stephen had made his own choices? I don't know if I blame her, but I do know that before he met her, Stephen never talked about money as if it were the only thing that mattered in life. After the program, letters started arriving. Hundreds of letters from older women telling similar stories. Sons who sold their mothers' houses without asking. Daughters-in-law who convinced their husbands to put their mothers in nursing homes to get their hands on the property. Families who justified the dispossession by saying it was for the mother's own good. One letter particularly struck me. It was from a woman in Kentucky who wrote, "Dear Mrs. Miller, my son took my house the same way. He told me I was too old to live alone, that it was dangerous. Now I live in a borrowed room, and he rents my house out to tourists. When I see your story on the news, I feel like I'm not alone. Thank you for fighting. Thank you for showing us that mothers have rights too." Those letters gave me a strength I didn't know I had. I was no longer fighting just for my ranch. I was fighting for all the older women who had been dispossessed by their own children. Mr. Davis brought me good news in November. "Mrs. Miller, the insurance company has approved the full payout. It's $750,000 to rebuild the house. And the land? The land is yours, officially. The judge has already ruled that all of Stephen's transactions were fraudulent. You've recovered every single acre." For the first time in months, I cried with happiness. I was going to be able to rebuild my house. I was going to be able to go back to my land. And Stephen? His trial is scheduled for January. With all the evidence we have, he'll likely get between 5 and 8 years in prison. 5 to 8 years. My son was going to spend the best years of his life in prison. No matter what he had done to me, he was still my son. "Mr. Davis, is there any way for Stephen to get a lighter sentence?" "Ma'am, he committed serious felonies, fraud, forgery, arson. But if he pleads guilty, if he accepts what he did, could he get a more lenient sentence?" "It's possible, but he would have to show genuine remorse and offer restitution." "What kind of restitution?" "Work to pay you back for what he stole. Community service. Agreeing to psychological treatment." That night, I couldn't sleep, thinking about Stephen in his cell. As much as he had hurt me, he was my child. I had carried him in my womb for 9 months. I had raised him with love. He was my first baby. my first reason for joy as a mother. I decided to visit him in jail. The Travis County Correctional Complex was a depressing place. Gray walls, barbed wire, guards with grim faces. They searched me as if I were a criminal before letting me into the visitation room. Stephen appeared after 20 minutes. He had lost a lot of weight. His skin was sallow and his eyes were sunken. When he saw me, he started to cry like he did when he was a boy and had hurt himself playing. "Mom, forgive me. Please forgive me." I sat across from him at the plastic table, separated by a yellow line we couldn't cross. "Stephen, why did you do it?" "I don't know, Mom. I don't know what happened to me. Melissa had me convinced that we had to help her parents, that we were selfish for having so much when they had nothing. And that's why you stole my house? I thought it would be temporary. I thought we'd fix things with you later. And that's why you burned it down?" Stephen covered his face with his hands. "Mom, when I saw you were going to win the lawsuit, I panicked. I had spent all the money on lawyers. Melissa's parents had nowhere to go. Melissa kept telling me it was my fault her family was going to be homeless. And what about your own mother? Didn't you think I could have been homeless too? I thought you'd be fine in your apartment. You thought what, Stephen? I thought you were old, that you didn't need much anymore." There it was again. The idea that because I was older, my needs mattered less. That because I was 68, I no longer had a right to happiness. "Stephen, that ranch was my whole life. I know, Mom. I know, and I hate myself for what I did." I looked him in the eyes. He looked genuinely sorry, but also defeated. "Do you hate yourself because you did something wrong or because you got caught?" The question surprised him. He thought for a long moment. "At first, I hated myself because I got caught. But now that I've had time to think, I hate myself because I hurt my own mother, the woman who gave me life. Stephen, the lawyer says that if you plead guilty and show real remorse, you might get a lighter sentence. Do you want me to get a lighter sentence? I want you to understand what you did. I want you to pay for your mistakes, but I also want you to have a chance to be a better person. Mom, if I could go back in time." "You can't, honey. You can only move forward and try to repair the damage." We sat in silence for several minutes. Stephen cried quietly, like he used to as a teenager when he had done something very wrong. "Mom, can you ever forgive me?" "Stephen, forgiving doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean things will ever go back to the way they were." "I know, but you're my son, and children can be forgiven if they show they've truly changed. What do I have to do?" "First, accept full responsibility for what you did. No excuses. No blaming Melissa or anyone else. I accept it. Second, work to repair the damage. Not just the money, the emotional damage too. How do I repair the emotional damage? That's something you're going to have to figure out for yourself." The visit ended after an hour. As I was leaving, Stephen called out from his table, "Mom, I'm going to make things right. I promise you." I left the jail feeling strange. Not happy, but not devastated either. As if I had closed a chapter of my life so I could start another. That night, I called Mr. Davis. "Mr. Davis, I want you to talk to Stephen's lawyer. Tell him that if my son pleads guilty to all charges and agrees to a restitution program, I will ask the judge to consider a reduced sentence." "Are you sure, Mrs. Miller?" "I'm sure. Stephen needs to pay for what he did, but he also needs a chance to redeem himself." "And Melissa?" "Melissa can fend for herself. She's not my daughter." For the first time in months, I felt at peace. Justice doesn't always mean revenge. Sometimes it means giving people the chance to be better than they were.